And I thought, that's how I'm going to conquer the dissertation. I'm going to take it one step at a time. To this day, he's my mentor. But that piece of advice is what I give to all of my students. Take it one step at a time. Pace yourself and give yourself the space that you need to work on that one step at a time. You know where you're going. You have the destination. Pace and space.
Welcome to the Grad Coach Podcast, or for those who know, the GCPC, where, as ever, we're here to simplify, demystify, and take all the anxiety out of academia. Also, as ever, I remain your host, Dr. E. But today, I'm joined by Dr. Karen Drosinos. And Karen has been on the inside for years, supervising dissertations and theses at Virginia Wesleyan University and Regent University. And having worked with more than 20 students over the past few years, she knows exactly what examiners are looking for and what it takes to conquer that dissertation mountain. Now, in this conversation, Dr. Drosinos is going to share the 5 nuggets of wisdom she wishes every research student knew before starting their dissertation or thesis. And if you're tackling any sort of postgrad research project, these insights are going to save you months of stress and set you up for success. And before we get there, don't forget to grab your free copy of the Grad Coach Research Toolkit. It's packed with hundreds of templates, checklists, video tutorials, and guides, all designed to fast-track your research and save your sanity. Trust me, over 10,000 students have already used it to get an unfair advantage, and you can too. And you'll find the link for all of that in the description down below. But for now, let's get into this conversation. Okay, Karen, so let's start with the first thing you think our students should know. How do you eat a dissertation? One bite at a time. I get it, the point's well taken, right? That large tasks must be measured in small steps or even bites. But how do we know what's the right next bite? In other words, when a research project is large, complex, and so important, how do we determine the most appropriate next step?
Great question. I, go down to the fact that this is going to be a huge undertaking. You are going to be in the driver's seat of this big assignment, this big topic, this big construct that you want to investigate. And sometimes our brains go all over the place. We go from this into that, and then we just don't know where to start. So when I think of that, how do you eat a dissertation one bite at a time? You've got to just figure out the direction in which you need to go. You got to figure out the steps that are manageable. And then you need to be able to know the destination, right? And so if you're climbing a mountain, you're going to look at the top of that mountain. You're going to see where you're going to need to go, but you're not going to just run right up at that mountain. You've got to pace yourself. So it's really about taking the space you need and the pace of work. And when I think of that quote, that is something that my dissertation chair, Dr. Carr, said to me at Regent University, where I got my doctorate and did my dissertation. He was my chair, and I was so overwhelmed. You go through your coursework, you take your comprehensive exams or your candidacy exams, and then they say, go do this. And I was just sitting in my thoughts, like, how am I going to start this? What am I going to do? What do I do first? Where do I go? What is this going to look like when I'm all done? And he said to me, Karen, how do you eat a hippo? One bite at a time. And I thought, that's how I'm going to conquer the dissertation. I'm going to take it one step at a time. To this day, he's my mentor. But that piece of advice is what I give to all of my students. Take it one step at a time. Pace yourself and give yourself the space that you need to work on that one step at a time. You know where you're going. You have the destination, pace and space.
So let's move on to your second piece of wisdom you wish our students would have been aware of, which is that the goal is completion, not world transformation. But nonetheless, the objective criteria for completion is often an original contribution to research, at least for the purposes of a PhD. And depending on the qualifying institution or the particular chair or supervisor or professor, this isn't exactly a low bar either. So how should we approach, if not interpret, the challenge of producing original contribution?
Well, it's going to be world transforming to the person who completes it, but it may not rock the boots of the researchers out in the field. Not yet, right? It's about quality, not quantity, when it comes to contributing to the body of knowledge that's already out there in your particular field. And sometimes I feel like students think that I am going to do this massive study. And, there is this big gap in the literature, and I'm going to conquer that. I'm going to fill that gap in with my study. And it's so big. And then when they get down to the methodology, they can't conquer that because it is just too big. You don't have as many gatekeepers. You don't have as many opportunities at your fingertips because you're not a doctor yet, right? Because when you complete it, your world opens up in academia. But when you're going through it, there is a little bit of proving yourself. So that's what I always tell my students, it's quality. Don't worry about getting this big number or looking at your results in a way where this is transformative and you're going to write about this in international journals. You will. Not yet. Do something manageable. That goes down to how do you eat a dissertation? You've got to manage it because we want something that is produced with the stamp of approval from whoever is on your chair, whoever is on your committee, your chair included, and your university. And so we want it quality.
But okay, that balance between figuring out what's appropriate, what's a relevant size, what's a reasonable size for the project, and trying to, as you say, manage your expectations and your ambitions, that balance is kind of stretched by the expectations of the institution to, as I said beforehand, produce something original and to produce something that contributes meaningfully to the field. So when that bar is set there, that it has to be a contribution, that it has to be original, especially, as I say, for our PhD students out there, when that bar is set that high, I mean, how do you really pare that down? How does the student manage to shed those expectations, or at least the weight of those expectations of original contribution, and still make this a manageable project?
If your topic and construct that you want to study or research has something to do with somebody else within the faculty, talk to that person. You can put something like a piece of Velcro onto their study, something that they've already spent years researching and focusing on. Well, how can you contribute to that study? So your contribution is going to be dramatic regardless, but it really does come down to what it is that is purposeful for you and can you get it done? And it comes down to just make a list. Like, how am I going to do this? Let's take like the IRB, and taking all of that. Let's say you've defended your proposal and you've got the stamp of approval to move ahead and do the study. What does that look like? And so writing exactly down, what is the generalization number? Is this a qualitative research? How many people am I going to have to interview for saturation? Like, start thinking broadly like that. And if it's manageable, go for it. But if it's not, go back to the literature, go back to your chapter 2, go back to your literature review, and figure out what area that you have not overlooked, but you magnified that could be minimized slightly to get the same answer or research for that question that you're asking.
Then let's move on to your next piece of wisdom, the next thing that you think our students should be aware of, which is to say that you've said the literature review provides relevance for your topic. It's not a living bibliography. But to what degree is the relevance of the research being measured by the familiarity with enough of the existing literature? Like, what have you told your students who struggled with determining how much is enough and establishing that relevance?
Chapter 2 for many doctoral candidates is very difficult because to many, I believe they see it as another research paper that they're doing for one of their doctoral level courses. And it's not. But it cannot be something where you're just doing this little building block of this. It's got to be meaningful. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be non-historical, although anchored by historical theories, which justifies your topic. So there's a lot going on there. The manageable piece to the literature review, in my opinion, is to create a skeleton. Think broad and big, and then narrow it down to the construct you want to study and why there isn't an answer to the pondering of what you have, right? Which will lead into the research question. In my experience of chairing dissertations, we go back and forth on that literature review, because that is ultimately going to tell me what your research question is and why you're asking it. And so often it's a really great literature review. Okay, yeah, you sold me. This is a great topic. It is anchored in historical information and theoretical frameworks. You've done that work. It's beautifully written. And then you get to a question, and it's like your literature review is about apples, and you're asking about a banana. Like, doesn't tie together, right? So you either ask about apples or write about bananas. So it's typically very well written, but sometimes they miss the mark, and we go back and forth on that. I will go down to chapter 4 and 5 once that study is complete, and I will wrote back right to that literature review and say, is this all tying together? I feel like that literature review is that thing that ties the bow together.
I like this. Although I'm a little nervous about the number of food analogies that we've got going, but I like this so far.
Listen, we're going to eat a dissertation. We have apples and bananas. Yeah.
Listen, it's a healthy meal, if nothing else. Exactly, yeah, exactly. We're getting there. Okay. So the next piece of wisdom that we have for our students that you've brought to us is the idea of effective writing and what you call the messy desk effect. So what exactly is the messy desk effect, and how effective are these techniques? I'm sure you're going to explain to us in a moment, really.
So the messy desk effect came to me as a qualitative researcher. I'm a qualitative researcher. And I believe in the humanistic approach to research, right? And when I disaggregate data or transcripts, yeah, you can do Max QDA, you can do in vivo, you can do all these programs, but I do it by hand always first. And it's a disaster. My house is an absolute mess. I've got Post-its, I've got chart paper, I've got strings from this place. Like, I get into it, right? That's what a dissertation writing is about. You're going to be all over the place because you're becoming a doctor. So you're taking all of this information and all of these thoughts, and you're organizing it into a product that's going to contribute to the field that you're studying. So it should be messy. But not only does it look messy, it feels messy. You know you're on the right track when you have thoughts that are coming in your head in your everyday life and you want to just quick write that down. It's messy because you have to get your ideas, your thoughts, your processes together, and you have to consistently work and write and don't stop. Now in technology, I mean, you can really organize so many different pieces of your dissertation. I'm not talking Chat GPT, and I'm not talking AI in that regard, but just in a way to organize the literature pieces that you're writing, the components that just might come to you that you want to just capture. And a lot of times with the messy desk, you'll realize that the most of that stuff you're going to throw away. A lot of that you're not going to keep. You're only going to keep the relevant stuff. But the process is to get it messy so you can choose the relevant information and create your dissertation around that.
So this is kind of the anti-Jordan Peterson advice, the whole, clean your room first before you can do anything. This is lean into the mess of your room, and if it's messy, it should be that way. And if it's disorganized, that's evidence of the amount of work that you're doing, and that's what that is. So what you're saying is we should lean into the mess.
What do you mean do? What do you mean you?
And lean into the disorganization because it's part and parcel of what it means to develop your thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to lean into it. You've got to allow yourself to be resilient in the process. And it doesn't feel great all the time. You're going back and forth on thoughts. You're going back and forth to research. You think you have a gap. You uncover a research article that was written 2 years ago, and it's studying exactly what you were going to study. Okay, now I have to pivot. You've got to have a level of academic resilience to lead into the messy and to trust the process. And we say a lot in higher education, trust the process. You aren't earning a PhD, you're becoming a doctor in the field that you're studying. So it is a process ultimately. And yeah, it doesn't feel great most of the time, and no, it shouldn't. When it doesn't feel good, and when you're frustrated and you're losing that courage, and you're trying to re-identify yourself, and you're like, I always was able to write so well. I can't put thoughts down. I don't know where to go here. That's okay. That's a part of the process. That's a productive struggle to get to the end result. That is becoming a doctor. And that's what your journey is. That's why you're on this journey.
Okay. So on to our last nugget, or our last piece of wisdom for our students, which is say that you've said that the chair is the navigator. The study is always in the driver's seat. But I'm curious, doesn't that make the researcher a passenger to their own research? You telling on yourself? In other words, how do we determine the appropriate balance of control and direction given to the chair or the supervisor or the professor versus the researcher? Or are you suggesting that the research is implicitly a process of letting go?
I'm going to challenge that thought with the chair is the navigator. The student is in the driver's seat. The study is the destination where we're going. Okay. So the navigator needs to know where they're going, right? So the chair's a chair for a reason. So the chair is going to know the destination, may not know what it's going to look like, may not know the outcome, may not know the methodology, but understands the process of conducting a study, a quality study that can be applicable to the field. The navigator can only give so much to the driver, to the student, right? Students ultimately move in that car. So in essence, I believe that, as you've taken many trips, if you're the navigator and your driver kind of knows where they're going, you're going to take a little nap, because you're going to be like, you know what, get off on this next mile marker over here. It's going to be like, and then go straight for another hour, and I'm going to go ahead and take a nap. Or I'm going to do my own stuff, because now they're going. But when there's some bumps in the road, you got the navigator there to be like, okay, let's pull over to the side. Let's check our tires. Let's check the gas tank. Where did we go wrong? Okay, let's get back on the road. And the driver is driving. So, the chair isn't going to, and I don't believe that a chair should ever hold the hand of a student.
Mm-hmm.
You've moved past the point of me holding your hand. You're now again becoming a doctor. But I'm there because my goal is your goal. My goal is to have you create a study that is of high quality, that provides insight into your concept or construct or topic, contributes to the field, and I'm going to put my name on that. If I'm putting my name on that, I want to have some idea of what you're doing. And that's what I'm here for, to give you that advice, to tell you to take a left or take a right, or just to say, you got to pull over. I'm going for a walk. You got to pull over. You got to figure out what you're going to do next. I'll come back and then we'll talk about it.
I got you. But, anybody who's been on a long journey, especially with people they're close to, knows well enough that at some point or another, there's going to be a disagreement somewhere along the line. Whether it's about whether you're going to take that left-hand turn or whether the destination is what the destination ought to be, or whether it's just a general disagreement in terms of the way we're doing the driving. So not to kind of flog the metaphor too much here, but in the cases where we don't have that ideal situation and our supervisors, our professors, our chairs either aren't as engaged as you might hope they would be, they're reading the map upside down, they're not as involved as you would hope they could be, perhaps because they're just busy taking care of a whole bunch of other things at the same time. It's not to say that it's purely malicious, but in those instances where there's a disagreement and where you feel as though what you want to do and the destination you want to drive in varies wildly from what your chair, your professor, or your supervisor is saying, I suppose it's a two-part question. One, how does one navigate that? And two, at what point is it appropriate to start entertaining that thought? Or is it always the case that you should think of yourself as, almost secondary to the superiority of your professor or your supervisor or your chair because they know more than you do, and you should always just kind of defer to them and put yourself in their hands? Or is there a point at which it becomes legitimate to ask the question, at least of yourself, about whether or not you're both heading in the same direction and whether or not a change of circumstances is required? So, one, how do we navigate this when there's a difference in opinion? And two, is it ever a legitimate question to ask? And how do I know when that's a legitimate thing to think?
So thinking about your first question, it is difficult because what drives a human is personality. And so there is in some way, shape, or form more success when some personalities or interests in studies match up. I've seen that, be more successful. When it comes down to working with a student that has this big goal to accomplish, I think you need to get in front of it before you get behind it. So one of the things that I like to do is have very candid conversations with my students and say, okay, we're going to do a timeline together. I need to know what you're thinking right up front. Where are we going with this? And I let them know, here's how I work. I'm going to be really transparent. If I think that you're turning right and you need to be turning left, I'm going to tell you. And then we're going to have a talk about it. Because what I think isn't going to necessarily guide your decision. Because ultimately, as you know, if you're going to defend your proposal after your chapter 3 and it's not solid, you've got your whole committee that's going to say, go back to the drawing board. Mm-hmm. I have the outlook of what the committee may say because mm-hmm. I've been where the committee is. Mm-hmm. So any feedback that I'm giving is going to be what I would want as a student. One thing I tell my students as well, if I'm saying something or giving you my opinion and you completely disagree, this is your work. I can't control what the committee says. I will trust you to a certain extent, right? But we will constantly be pulling back and peeling the onion to figure out if this is going to be a solid study and where we're going left or right. It's a very tricky situation. And yeah, there have been times where dissertation chairs had to be changed. I believe that there are many steps that a chair needs to take prior to a decision like that, because it's ultimately the student who is going to be, at a disadvantage of having to, start over with a new person. But I do believe that you've got to get in front of it before you get behind it. So right in the beginning of working, to students, share your ideas to your chair, be transparent with them, but be very open to the suggestions that they give you because they want the same thing you want. Again, it goes right down to you're not going to change the world. You may be too big in your idea, and I can see that that's going to be a struggle for you. Do you want to continue with this for another year or two? Or do you want to create a solid study? What do you want? So those kinds of candid conversations that are going to happen. In the process of becoming a doctor, you've got to be receptive to feedback. And that is a process of resilience. You've got to be receptive to feedback. You don't have to necessarily agree, but you got to be receptive and think widely. Why would my chair say this? It's completely different than what I'm thinking. Okay, well, think about it. Why would your chair say that?
Well, on that note, somewhere between onions and bananas and apples and eating hippos and whole dissertations, I feel strangely full.
I know, right? You don't need lunch or anything.
It's been a 4-course meal. No, we've done quite well. One course was a whole hippo. But between those things, Karen Drosinos, Dr. Drosinos, as I said earlier, the part-time dissertation chair at Regent University and adjunct professor at Virginia Wesleyan University. I just want to thank you again for your time and for your insights. I'm sure our audience will appreciate it. Thank you. All right, and that is a wrap for today's episode of the Grad Coach Podcast, or the GCPC. Of course, a huge thank you to Dr. Drosinos for sharing those thoughts and nuggets of wisdom with us today. Meanwhile, don't you forget to grab your free copy of the Grad Coach Research Toolkit. It is still loaded with templates, checklists, video tutorials, and guides that will save you time and stress. You'll find the link waiting for you in the description somewhere down below there somewhere. And last but not least, of course, remember to hit that like and subscribe with a little bell somewhere too, so you don't miss future episodes. You know, we've got plenty more expert advice lined up to help you out on your research journey. But until then, peace, productivity, and positive results.